I'd like to welcome you all to the IMarEST's fifth Founders Lecture. And I'd like to thank ClassNK, especially for sponsoring these lectures. This is the fifth lecture. This is the fifth lecture that ClassNK have sponsored, and we're very grateful for that. The lecture tonight is going to be by Mr. Lim, the Secretary General of IMO, and I'm going to invite Mr. Kinoshita from ClassNK up to do an introductory talk and to introduce Mr. Lim. So, Mr. Kinoshita.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tetsuya Kinoshita. I'm Executive Vice President of ClassNK. And on behalf of ClassNK, I would like to extend my warmly welcome to you all here tonight. Let me also take this opportunity to thank our gracious host, IMarEST, for their continued cooperation. For many years now, the ClassNK and IMarEST have worked together to improve technical standards in the maritime industry and promote idea exchange and education. It is our shared vision that led us to create the annual Founders Lecture series, which is now entering, as Paul said, entering its fifth year. It has always been recognized that the best way of improving safety at sea is by developing international regulation that are followed by all shipping nations, and in 1948, IMO was established as a permanent international body to promote maritime safety more effectively. Since its establishment, it has actively endeavored to improve safety records, and it is no understatement to say that shipping in 2016 is a much safer form of transport than before, thanks to their sustained efforts. However, notwithstanding the many advancements, significant challenges remain ahead. The global maritime industry is facing now the very tough time now. But just as IMO has safely navigated the waters of history, I know that our industry is braced for the storm and will overcome the challenges that lie ahead through partnership and perseverance. Here to talk to us about our voyage together, how IMO has safely navigated the water of history and stands ready for the challenges of today, is our special guest, a man who has spent his entire working life in maritime. He brings with him invaluable insight and wisdom. After graduating with a major in nautical science, he worked as a Korean naval officer before going on to obtain his master's degree in maritime administration. An active member within the IMO since 1986, he has been engaged in all areas of maritime law and now heads one of our industry's most influential organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me welcoming our guest speaker, IMO Secretary General, Mr. Kitack Lim. Mr. Lim, please.
Thank you, Mr. Kinoshita, for the excellent introduction of myself. And also thank you, Mr. James, for opening this important session. So that, the Kinoshita-san explained about myself. See, but I have to confess about myself. I'm not really very renowned or expert in this area. But based on my experience and at the international level, and also the experience while I was working for the government of the Republic of Korea, and also I'd like to share some ideas or views with you. I'm very honored to be here. This is, I believe, a very prestigious occasion, fifth, the IMarEST Founders lecture, sponsored by the NK, ClassNK. And really, I have to appreciate for organizer for this important event. Good evening, and ladies and gentlemen. So again, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me to this very, very prestigious occasion. So as I mentioned, I'm not really expert at this marine engineering, but I have been very much interested in this area. I started as a navigator, and I sailed for some years, on international ocean-going ships, and then I joined the government of the Republic of Korea. And based on my background, while I have been working in the Seoul in the Republic of Korea, luckily, unluckily, whenever there is a serious maritime incident, oil pollution incident, or some ferry incident, one of recent incident is under special operation at the moment. I was called to go there to the site to assist those people who are directly taking care of that issues. Then while I have assisting the local the maritime authority, and assisting those people from private sectors, from a shipping company or whatever, and I started to think about this kind of a technical area, apart from just sailing, on board a ship at the ocean, but which is quite different from this area. It needs a lot of research, a lot of expertise, a lot of cooperation among relevant stakeholders in terms of a technical area. So I started to think about this marine engineering. But since I'm here in London, I met the CEO of the IMarEST, and I got to know more about the IMarEST, the marine engineering area. So now, in my capacity of the Secretary General of IMO, IMO may not deal with this kind of real, the engineering area. But tonight, I would like to introduce about what we are doing and what we are looking ahead for the future. My speech is right. Made this writing speech. It says 47 minutes, but I'd like to skip that part. But in order to, nowadays I have to be, very, cautious to say something, at the outside of the IMO. Because if we say something wrong or something not very accurate, it may cause some problem to me or to IMO. But to be safe, if you indulgence, I try to read this speech. There is no doubt that London is one of the great maritime capital of the world, and the presence here of some of the great institutions that have shaped maritime history plays a huge part in ensuring that it remains so. With a proud past that can be traced back to the 19th century, IMarEST is one of the pillars of the London maritime community, yet it remains as the vibrant and relevant and forward-looking today as at any time in the distinguished history. You will be aware, I'm sure, that IMO is also headquartered, luckily, in London. In fact, it is the only specialized agency of the United Nations to be based in this country. On the personal note, that is my third stint of living in London, so I have been able to pick up quite a lot of phrases and the sayings during my time here. One that I like is, if you ain't broke, don't fix it. Although I am told that you engineering prefer to say that if it ain't broke, that means we haven't designed enough features for it yet. So, at IMO, our mission is to promote safe, secure, environmentally sound, efficient, and sustainable shipping through cooperation. Like all good mission statements, this is a simple enough sentiment behind which lies a detailed, multifaceted, and sometimes complex structure designed with the sole purpose of achieving those ends. Like IMarEST, IMO also has a proud history, but we cannot compete with IMarEST when it comes to the longevity and the technical expertise. The convention by which IMO was founded was adopted in Geneva in 1948. And the organization actually came into being 10 years later, once the convention had been ratified by enough government to meet its entry into force criteria. Today, IMO has 171 member states and 3 associated members, and a host of intergovernmental organizations and NGO also participate actively in its work, of which IMarEST is, of course, one of the important participants to the IMO meeting. But let us rewind for a moment and think about why the world needed IMO back in 1949, and why the organization is still just as relevant today as it was then. IMO, originally known as Intergovernmental Maritime Consultative Organization, IMCO, and was born into a world weary from war, and in which the old colonial power still held sway in terms of global prosperity and trade. As a consequence, there were also major power in shipping, and as a leading maritime nation, they tended to create their own standard with regard to vessel construction, safety, manning, and so on. But in 1949, only 3 years after the creation of the United Nations, a new spirit of global unity was in the air, and the first glimpse of a new world order were on the horizon. It was also gradually becoming generally accepted that the situation in which each shipping nation had its own maritime law was counterproductive to ensuring the seamless flow of traffic and promoting safety in shipping operations worldwide. Not only were standards different, but some were far higher than others. Consensus safety-minded ship owners were at an economic disadvantage to their competitors who were spending relatively little money on safety, And this was a threat to any serious attempt to improve safety at the sea and to international seaborne trade as a whole. There was therefore an inescapable logic in favor of the framework of the international standards to regulate the shipping, standards which could be adopted by all and accepted by all. In fact, the first attempts at such a common approach date back to well beyond the formation of IMO. From the mid-19th century onward, a number of international maritime agreements were adopted. A treaty of 1863, for example, introduced certain common navigational procedures that ships should follow when encountering each other at the sea so as to avoid collision, and was signed by some 30 countries and adopted in 1889. And Titanic disaster of 1912 spawned the first Safety of Life at Sea Convention, which, albeit completely modified and updated and nowadays within the responsibility of IMO, is still most important international instrument addressing maritime safety today. But it was not until the establishment of IMO that there was a recognized international body to address such concern. Since its formation, IMO's main task has been to develop and maintain a comprehensive regulatory framework for international shipping. Its mandate was originally limited to safety-related issues, but subsequently its remit has expanded to embrace environmental considerations, legal matters, technical cooperation, as well as issues that affect the overall efficiency of the shipping, security, piracy issues, and other maritime crimes. Today, shipping is perhaps the most international of all the world's great industry. The ownership and management chain surrounding any particular vessel can embrace many different countries. It is not unusual to find that the owner, operator, shippers, charterers, insurers, and cross societies, not to mention the officers of a crew, are all of different nationality, and that none of these is from the country whose flag flies at the ship's stern. Clearly, there has to be a common approach to regulation and the standard, so that the ships can ply their trade around the world and the countries receiving foreign ships can be confident that in accepting them, they do not place their safety, security, environmental integrity at unreasonable risk. The direct output of the IMO's regulatory work is a comprehensive body of international conventions supported by literally hundreds of guidelines and recommendations that between them govern just about every facet of the shipping industry, from the designer's drawing board to the recycling facilities. So much for IMO's history and the track record. For more interesting, relevant, and important, I think, are the challenges we are facing going forward. Although IMO was founded as a strictly technical body, there is no doubt that today the political economic dimension of the organization's work are becoming increasingly influential, and we are adapting and changing accordingly. Of course, when it comes to facing the future, I'm an optimist. They say that an optimist sees a glass as half full, whereas a pessimist sees the same glasses as half empty. A marine engineer, of course, sees the glass that is twice as big as it needs to be. When we talk of challenges, there are few more urgent or more pressing challenges than addressing global warming and climate change. This is not a problem that is going away. Indeed, for some, time may be running out. It is a problem the whole world to face, not just the shipping. And I think everybody should draw great encouragement from the collective will shown by the global leaders during the COP21 in Paris last December and the subsequent signing ceremony in New York in April this year. But from shipping perspective, let's look at some of the background. According to the estimate in the third IMO GHG study in 2014, international shipping emitted almost 800 million tons of CO2 in 2012, or about 2.2% of the total emission volume for that year. By contrast, in 2007, before the global economic downturn, international shipping is estimated to have emitted 885 million tons of CO2, over 2.8% of the global emission of CO2 for that year. These percentages are all more significant when you consider that shipping is the principal carrier of world trade, providing a vital service to global economic development and prosperity. However, mid-range scenarios forecast in the third IMO GHG study show that by 2050, CO2 emission from international shipping could grow by between 50 and 250%, depending upon future economic growth and energy development. Therefore, although shipping is already the most energy efficient mode of the mass transport of cargo, the international community must deliver realistic, pragmatic solutions, both from technical standards and the political perspective in terms of international shipping. In 2011, IMO adopted a suite of technical and operational measures which together provide an energy efficiency framework for ships, mainly for new ships. These mandatory measures entered into force as a package on January 2013, addressing ship types responsible for approximately 85% of the CO2 emission from international shipping. Together, they represent the first ever mandatory global regime for CO2 emission reduction in an entire industry sectors. You will be very familiar, I'm sure, with the Energy Efficient Design Index, or EEDI, and the Ship Energy Efficiency Management Plan, or SEEMP, S-E-E-M-P. These are significant achievements of which IMO is proud and justifiably so. And recently, in last April, when we had the Marine Environment Protection Committee, we agreed to some new mechanism which is related to the data collecting system with respect to the oil consumption of the existing ships. So that mechanism is called the three-step approach for the data collecting purpose, which is one of the most significant movement progress in terms of the climate change issues. So that is expected to adopted at the next coming the MEPC meeting in October this year. So we expect that will be adopted without any serious problem, but that will be a very important progress. Major. So we collect the relevant information about the oil consumption of existing ships. Once we collect the information, then we analyze those information, reported to the member state, then report to the IMO. Then we analyze those information, and then we decide what kind of a real measure, should be taken by the International Maritime Organization for future work for the climate change issues. I would like to now turn to some thought about the fundamental nature of the regulatory imperatives. What is the thinking, what is the philosophy that underpins the regulatory framework within which shipping operates? Do we, for example, regulate in such a way that the latest technology, the best technology currently available, is required across the whole fleet, thereby raising standard universally or equally? Or do we want regulation that go further? Do we want regulation that challenge the engineers, naval architects, designers to push the envelope of technology ever further? Do we want regulation that stretch the current boundaries of technological possibility? Looking ahead, I believe that technology really does hold the key to a sustainable future. I'm not suggesting there will be one single breakthrough that will solve the problem at a stroke. No silver bullet or killer app. But I think what we will see is real progress brought about by the cumulative effect of the world of marginal gains in all areas of human activities. The EEDI and the SIMP are good examples. They will help to make individual ships themselves significantly more energy efficient. And the data collecting scheme approved by the, as I mentioned, will provide a proper statistical basis for the decision to be made about any further action that may be deemed necessary. The regulatory framework for the shipping adopted by IMO embraces what are deemed to be the highest possible standard that can be applied universally. But of course, that doesn't stop others from embracing higher standards, should they choose to do so. But in an international context, in the context of an industry that needs to operate within the consistent framework that is recognized and applied equally wherever in the world a ship may call, those higher standards must be self-applied, by which I mean there is nothing wrong with individual countries applying higher or more stringent standards to their own vessels, but they must also recognize the validity of the universal standard that apply to all ships. The very essence of international regulation and one of the foundations on which IMO is built is that no advantage should be gained either by cutting corners or by unilaterally imposing higher standards. The enhancement of the maritime safety and security and the protection of the marine environment remain at the core IMO's objectives. They dictate the broader direction of the organization activities. Other key areas that we are addressing, for example, include the development of a goal-based standard for vessel construction, the safety of a passenger vessel, both the giant modern cruise ship of today and the domestic ferries on which so many in the developing world depend, the implementation of the Ballast Water Management Convention, the application of a Polar Code, which become mandatory from the beginning of next year, the development of e-navigation, continuing effort to address security piracy and other maritime crime. Addressing all of these will require application of technology. The world must invest in technology. As engineers, will be instrumental in ensuring that that technology is available by continuing to innovate and to develop. Engineering and technology must become a driving force for the better world. In the 21st century, more than ever, we rely on technology. Modern technology provides unprecedented opportunity to reduce the chances of a human error and thereby help enhance maritime safety and reduce casualties. As engineers and as a member of the shipping community, you are uniquely placed to take a strong lead in ensuring that cutting-edge technology and design are effectively integrated into everyday ship operation, and that the potential benefits they offer are properly harnessed. They say that one man's magic is another man's engineering, and there is no doubt that this is the fascinating time to be an engineer in shipping. The opportunities afforded by new technology place the industry potentially on the brink of a new era. If we think of the technologies emerging around the fuel and energy use, automation and the vessel management, material and construction, and so many other areas, it is not difficult to envisage a new generation of ships that bring step change improvement in all areas that IMO regulate, and yes, in the economic viability and the profitability too. That, I think, is a part of the voyage we are taking together. As I mentioned at the beginning of the lecture, I believe IMO is as relevant today as it was when it began operation back in 1959. The regulatory framework will lead continual adjustment to keep pace with the technology. The philosophical shift in favor of goal-based standards, initially for ship construction, is important in this respect, as it allows for innovative new ways to meet the agreed goals to be developed without having to rewrite the rule book every time. But notwithstanding the need for occasional adjustment, the regulatory framework is now quite comprehensive, and it is well understood that the development of a new regulation should only be undertaken if there is a clear, demonstrable need to do so. Indeed, IMO has been actively engaged in efforts to reduce the administrative burden and the red tape associated with regulatory compliance for ship owners and the staff. In the coming years, therefore, IMO will have an increasing important role to play in the implementation of an existing regulatory framework. Putting aside for a moment whether it is a good thing or not, it is a fact that today we live in a global society which is supported by the global economy. The potential benefits are clear. Growth can be accelerated and the prosperity more widespread. Skilled technology can be more evenly dispersed, and both individuals and the countries can take advantage of previously unimagined economic opportunities. The broad challenge that we all face is how to ensure future growth can be achieved sustainably, how to ensure that globalization becomes a positive force for all the world people, not for just a privileged few. As a part of the United Nations family, IMO is actively working toward the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development that the world leader pledged to support in 2015 last year. Most of the elements of that agenda will only be realized with the sustainable transport sector supporting world trade and facilitating global economy. Quite apart from the key role shipping plays as the carrier of a global trade, maritime activity also provides an important source of income to many developing countries. Indeed, developing countries now lead the world in some shipping most important ancillary businesses, including the registration of ships, the supply of seagoing manpower, and ship recycling. They also play a significant part in the ship owning and operating, shipbuilding and repair, and the port services, among others, and their presence in IMO is appropriately strong. I believe maritime activity can both drive and support a healthy economy, and that is why investment, growth, and improvement in the shipping and the port sector are also important. It facilitates the global commerce and the creation of wealth and the prosperity among nations and the people, creating a wide variety of jobs aboard the ships and the shore, with beneficial impacts both direct and indirect, on the livelihood of others. There can be no doubt that transport and communication are crucial for sustainable development in the global environment. If the benefits of globalization are to be evenly spread, all countries must be able to play a full and active part in the distribution system and build a strong transport infrastructure. IMO's contribution toward this goal will be founded on our work surrounding implementation and capacity building. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to turn now to some thought about ocean governance or need for integrated ocean management. Water covers, as you know, around 70% of our planet's surface. Not only is it vital in the strict literal sense of the word, but it also provides a resource that supports our society in so many different ways. The world ocean provides raw material, energy, food, employment, a place to live, a place to relax, and the means to transport about 9% of the global trade. The very identity of hundreds of countries, regions around the world is historically, geographically entwined with the sea and the ocean. There are many industries that rely entirely on the access to ocean resources, services, space, such as the maritime transport, offshore oil and gas, port, renewable energy, fisheries, aquaculture, and the marine tourism, and the seabed mining. These in turn generate other industries that are also dependent on maritime activities. For example, these include shipbuilding, repair, ship design, ship broking, and catering, chartering, vessel traffic management, pilotage, ships agency, many others. If all of these are included in what one might call blue economy, then it becomes clear that we are addressing a very sizable industrial sector and the one that is growing too. Ocean-based industries are already large and they are expanding rapidly. But this situation has inherent quandary. For the success and the growth of these industries is actually threatening the integrity of very element that sustain them, support them, and they give them life, the sea. It has been widely documented that the global marine environment and its resources are being degraded and overexploited at an ever-increasing rate and scale. Species, critical habitats, and the health of the marine ecosystem are all becoming endangered to that extent where this is adversely affecting people who live in the coastal region and the communities worldwide that depend on marine area for food and livelihood. Furthermore, conflict in the use of ocean space and resources among the various stakeholders are increasing. Although the ocean covers such a large percentage of the Earth's surface, they are becoming increasingly crowded. So the search for growth in this sector, blue growth, is a balancing act. The varied and sometimes conflicting stakeholders all have a legitimate interest in the process, while the overall health of the sea themselves is a common concern. What is needed is a collaboration within and across the different sectors to address impact and reduce the conflict. This clearly suggests that integrated approach with a long-term focus, an approach that responds to the world resources, climate, and environmental challenges. As a maritime community, we need to ensure that growth is coordinated and planned with input from all relevant stakeholders, and that opportunities for survey are identified and taken. There is a clear tendency among actors in shipping and transport to operate in silos. Among IMO member governments, for example, we often find that areas such as maritime safety and navigation, port and infrastructure development and transport policies, environmental protection, fisheries, security, customs, border control, all fall within the different departments or different ministries. And yet, in reality, all these areas are linked to one another and have a mutual influence and a bearing on each other. And IMO has a legitimate interest in all of these areas too. As I said before, I strongly believe that establishing a sustainable maritime transportation sector is essential to the development and the growth of the world economy as we move forward. But to achieve it, it will require a coordinated, integrated approach to maritime policy. I believe IMO is the place to integrate maritime policy on the global scale. Of course, the business of shipping is not the business of IMO. The business of IMO is to create a framework of a standard and the regulation that enable shipping to operate safely, securely, cleanly, and efficiently. A framework that applies equally to all participants and which does not allow anyone to gain an advantage either by cutting corners or by imposing unilateral requirements. But at the same time, there is a strong belief within IMO that the shipping and the related maritime activities are essential components of future sustainable growth for the Earth's 7 billion plus inhabitants. And that belief fosters a clear understanding that the shipping itself must also be sustainable, and that means economically sustainable too, profitable in other words. After the IMO's Marine Environment Protection Committee met in April to discuss, among other things, the continuing effort to address greenhouse gas emission issues from ships, I read a comment in the non-specialist media which said that IMO represents shipping at the United Nations. Now, we all know that that is not very true. IMO represents the collective views of decision of each 171 member government. And they represent, member states represent billions of ordinary people all over the world who rely on shipping every day of their lives, whether they realize it or not. Those people need a viable, profitable shipping industry. Their prosperity, their well-being, and in some cases their survival depend on it. So when IMO regulate about issues like how ships are designed, built, the reduction of emission, the use of a cleaner fuel, ballast water management, container safety, and so on, the overarching objective is to ensure the people of the world for whom shipping is indispensable can continue to enjoy the benefit of this important industry on which they rely, and in a manner that meets modern expectations about safety, environmental protection, and so on. I get a strong sense that ship owners, by and large, understand that and are supportive. Of course, their immediate priority may from time to time be different from those of this organization. But as I said, when standing for election of Secretary General myself, I want IMO, its member state, and the industry to embark on a voyage together. And I think that's exactly what we are doing. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a great pleasure to deliver this lecture to you to this evening. It is good to have this opportunity to approach familiar topic from the slightly different angle, and I have enjoyed the process. I thank you for the listening attentively, I hope. I would like to leave you with this observation, and I'm told many of you are familiar with. If at first you don't succeed, use the bigger hammer. I hope my speech tonight does not have you reaching for your new hammers. Ladies and gentlemen, really appreciate and thank you for your attention for my. So if I add just one thing, as I mentioned, I'm very much personally interested in this marine engineering area, but I do not know much about some technical area. But in my capacity working, I really looking forward, we working closely, with your IMarEST and IMO for our common objective. Thank you.
So we have time for a few questions.
Mr. Sablok from London. What do you have to say about the implementation of the ballast water management? When do you think it's going to be implemented? Thank you.
Yes, I receive, that question very often. There is two ways, two area criteria, number of the member states who ratify and threshold of tonnage, 35 the percentage, the very, very close to the 35%. So we have at the moment the 52, the member state ratified. So, but still, there is still the very thin, tonnage to go. But we expect that will be the criteria will be fulfilled, met by the end of this year. So I can't say it's really timing, but it is very close. So, but you say just the timing, but I receiving a lot about from industry some different criteria. So, but yeah. Yeah, there is some gap in terms of criteria between IMO and the United States. But once I did some study, while I was campaigning for the election last year. But since I took office this year and I look into process what happened for the last several years, which caused some gap between IMO and the United States. But there is really inevitable process. But since I took office, I saw the situation as of the end of last year. In a way twisted. It was a difficult situation. But we have been trying to have the communication as much as possible in order to narrow the gap, to cooperate, So there has been at least some progress in terms of the procedure of the type approval and also some criteria of that, the ballast water. But for time being, we will have some more discussion until the next MEPC in terms of the type of procedure G8. So there is, we believe there is a closing to each other, but I would not say it will just identical, same, between two sides, but there will be good progress. So, but from IMO Secretariat point of view, we will continue to have a communication, in order to reduce unnecessary negative impact to the industry. That is a point. But so far, United States also, try to do, in that sense. That is, I believe, it is a good progress. So but for time being, we wait for time until the next the MEPC meeting to see the further progress. That is issues. But we are working on that issues.
Question.
Good evening, Martin Shaw. Thank you very much for your excellent lecture. life at sea for the engineer is becoming more complex because of technology and regulation. I was wondering if you could say what IMO is planning to do in the future to make life a bit more simple and a bit easier for those aboard ship.
You mean the regulation is look very complicated and how to simplify?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
But actually, since we are talking about the marine engineering, engineering always look very complicated. But I believe IMO since establishment 1959, IMO has done along with all member states has contributed great in terms of safety and the environment in many areas. So as to your position, there is some concern, mainly from industry. They see, some, at least some part of the regulation that look very complicated. It's not easy to apply. So in my capacity, there is, I see that there is, inevitable progress until, the IMO has been developing current regulation and convention. But that is 2 points. One is we need to look at how effectively those regulations are implemented by the industry. How effectively by industry and in a member state, particularly developing countries. So see whether there is some area to improve so that it become more, accepted by the industry and then. And second one is that we need, in order to revise the regulation, in order to develop a new regulation, we are doing based on a holistic approach or some technical process. But I hope we need a more proper some analysis, in order to introduce the new regulation or in order to, revise the current one. So we try to have a so-called better regulation, which is more practically accepted by the end user. So in order to that, in my capacity, we are going to strengthen some analysis function, including some policy area or some technical area. So based on those analyses, so we submit the outcome of the analysis to the member state, the committee or council or whatever, and then they make use of that outcome of analysis for their future work by the member state. So I'm very much focusing the effective implementation for better regulation. One is, another one is, we have to do more capacity building for developing countries so that they can catch up with the progress, technical progress. So that is, the one of my key area. And the third one area, in terms of that, I'm very much emphasizing importance of the communication involving among member states. But one of the area, communication with the industry. We have to know more about the realistic story of the industry. So that is the key, some of the key area which I would like to focus during my tenure. So that's why this evening occasion, I was advised by the secretariat. Secretary General, you can be dangerous if you go there. Maybe you refuse that. And then I thought, because I knew to the IMO, I have been a long time delegate. So I was thinking, since last year, I emphasize every emphasize communication. But I escaped. Then I thought, okay, I should go and have some exchange views and communicate. So I have thought I need to know more about real world of industry. Also, I personally very much interested in this marine engineering. So we will do our best, to, in a way, end user friendly, practical, the regulation. So we will have a more communication with your expert, for that purpose. So that's why I'm looking forward to, working closely with you in the course of the IMO meeting process.
Anybody else? Any more questions? Martin.
It's Martin Murphy from IMarEST. Mr. Lim, do you think, you mentioned and talked a lot about technology advancement and change. Do you think the IMO can drive technical change, or do you think the IMO will respond in its regulation to technology advancement in industry?
That is actually I have to answer very cautiously. It can be misunderstood by others. But if I would say in this way, IMO is in its nature regulating body. As the one of the United Nations agency. So we have to look at all member states, 171 member states. So there is some differences depending upon member state. So if we, try to move too fast, then it may, cause some the difficulties for the developing countries. So there's one. And the second one, the IMO is actually, it consists of 171 member states. So decision making is done by the member state. Okay. And as the secretariat function, we try to, from outside, we are providing some information or material as instructed by the decision-making by member state. But at the same time, we try to provide relevant information. The analysis, the report, as I mentioned, for them, member state, to make a proper decision. So we would not, try to just we drive, technological development, and try to input, those technology development into global regulation. It can be, detrimental to the all in terms of the universal implementation by the all member states. So we have to be in a balanced position, try to help and provide relevant information for member states to have a look at, then make a better, regulation. Also, as I mentioned, that we are doing capacity building, particularly for developing countries. Developing countries, they may not have enough expertise, and they may not have catch up with the progress of the IMO meeting. So we try to help them to know more about. So that is the position. So, but at the same time, apart from the regulating function, we have to be very keen on technological development. What's going on? What will come in the future? We have to trace those development. But how we, the input those one into regulation, it is, as I mentioned, a different area. So, thank you for that.
I'd like to thank you very much on behalf of both the IMOs and ClassNK. So, thank you very much, Mr. Lim.
Okay. Thank you.